Hey guys, welcome back to the Imperfect show. I'm Susanne, this is Jeremy. And today we are going to talk about something that is very personal to us. We wanted to talk a little bit about the area of parenting. We've shared with you guys before, we have 4 kids. We have 2 adult children. Actually, our oldest is 20. Then we have an 18-year-old son, and then we have an 11-year-old daughter and a 10-year-old son. And so this is an area that we're, I guess, kind of in the middle of parenting in different areas, parenting across different ages and life stages. And so we just wanted to take a few minutes and talk about some of that today.
Yep. In fact, you might hear them in the background today. So that's just our kids.
We're just all home together today.
We're all home together today. Parenting is one of those areas, as we get into this conversation, that we tend to compare ourselves with other parents and other families, and we become sometimes dismissive about what other people are doing as it relates to our own situation. We have mentioned this probably every episode, but the reason we chose Imperfect as the title for the show, the Imperfect Show, is because there are no perfect people. We're all imperfect. We're all struggling with various aspects of life. In some areas we struggle more than others. In some areas we struggle less than others, but we all struggle. None of us are perfect, and yet from the outside, we do our best to project that we've got it all together and we've got it all figured out. But sometimes, and I think in parenting, this is one of those times, we project on others that they have it all figured out, or that their situation is different than ours, so the rules don't necessarily apply across the board. And we tend to say, well, if my situation were like theirs, then things would be better, my kids would be better, parenting would be less difficult. If I had fewer kids, or older kids, or better kids, or my marriage situation was more stable, or whatever. We tend to have reasons that our situation is different and parenting for us is more difficult, and therefore we just need to do the best we can to get to the other side. I think we tend to do that quite a bit.
Yeah, I think parenting is a very touchy subject for a lot of people because no one likes to be told how to parent your own kids, and it's really difficult maybe to allow someone to speak into your life, but also because maybe they don't, every kid has a different personality, all of that, but maybe you're like us and you didn't talk about having kids before you had them or got married. And so for us, this has been a really interesting process because maybe we never really talked about it when we were dating. We never talked about having kids, how many kids we were going to have.
I just wanted to get married.
Might not be the best way to handle the situation.
No, probably not the best way.
And then when we were pregnant with our first, we're like, oh man, we should probably talk about this because it's just not something that we planned for. And so whatever your situation looks like, it could be really easy maybe to be in a situation like ours where you didn't plan necessarily for that, or you didn't plan for the timing of it. And you think, okay, well, it's easier for these other people because they've been planning for children, they've been preparing for children. And so obviously it's easier for them than maybe it is for someone who hasn't planned or prepared. And so it is really, I feel like a touchy, kind of tricky subject because it's so personal to so many people.
And I think that's one of the reasons, as we've been talking about this and trying to develop this is one of the reasons that when it comes to areas like marriage, like relationships, like parenting, it's much more helpful to have principles that we can use, because principles aren't tied to a particular situation. You may have a great financial situation or a bad one. You may have a stable, as it relates to parenting, a stable marriage or one that's not so stable. You may be in a single parent home. You may have come from a place where you learned how to parent well or not. When we're talking about principles, you're talking about things that can be applied regardless of where you find yourself in life. And things that can be applied at any stage of life. And this is, again, really helpful when you understand that principles, and that's what we're going to try to share as a few principles today, that principles aren't tied to, I'm just getting started, and so if I do this, it will be right. You may have older kids, or your kids may be a little bit further along. You can begin applying these principles in ways that will help you. What we know about parenting for sure is that it's always hard. I've not ever met an honest parent who said it was easy.
Right.
It's always a struggle. And sometimes that alone can be helpful to know. It is always a struggle. This week we watched the movie with Mr. Rogers. What was it called?
Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood.
Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood, of course it was. And one part of that movie, one scene in that movie, the reporter is doing a story on him. He asked him, he said, you took some time off for a couple of years and then you came back. Why did you leave and why did you come back? And in the movie, it's a movie, disclaimer, it's a movie. But in the movie, Mr. Rogers said, well, we had a difficult couple of years as a family, and we were dealing with some things with our kids. And he was very honest in that moment about the struggles he had with his own children. And it can be helpful to us to know that even Mr. Rogers had a hard time parenting and had to figure some things out. And he said, we got through it, we figured it out, and you can. It's always hard, it's always a challenge, it will never be easy. I think even when your kids are older, it's not easy. Talking to parents who have much older children, they still worry about their kids just like they used to. But knowing it's hard doesn't mean you can't do it. It can be great. But there are some principles. And that's what we want to talk about for just a couple of minutes today. Principles for having lasting relationships with your kids through all of the phases of life. And this is something Susanna teaches on in our women's program with Mighty Oaks. And has spent a lot of time trying to help ladies through this. Some of it is, I think, lessons that you've learned with our own kids, and we're still learning with our own kids. Yeah. But start talking about some of these principles for having lasting relationships with your kids. Where do we need to start when we start talking about this?
I think the thought behind it is that we all want not just to have relationships with our kids while they're in our house with us, but I'm someone that likes to look at the future and how what I'm doing right now is going to impact a relationship or a situation for, like, what is this going to look like for me or this person over the course of time. And so I really started thinking about my kids, and at the time I started kind of putting some of these thoughts together. They're getting a little bit older, the relationship kind of changes. I remember when our 18-year-old son, when he was I think he was right about maybe junior high age when I started kind of thinking about these things, and I'm like, man, it's such a different shift in the relationship, and with girls and with boys. But in particular, my relationship with my son is what made me kind of start thinking about some of these things. Is there's a shift in the relationship between child and parent as the kids start to get a little bit older, and really just thinking about what are some things that I could do right now to impact my relationship with my kids as they get older. And so I can have a relationship still with them when they're no longer living in our house. Right. And maybe, hopefully, they will want to have a relationship with me when they're not in my house with me anymore. And so
that's an important point to make, right? Is that our kids will eventually leave our homes. I think sometimes parents struggle because the goal almost is to keep their kids close, when really the goal of parenting should be to prepare your kids for their future, whatever that is. And that may take them away. They're going to leave. So don't struggle with the idea that they're going to leave. Embrace the idea that they're going to leave. That's what a healthy maturity, growing into that's what it looks like as they go out and do something. And so prepare for that in your parenting so that you have a relationship with them afterwards, because that is the goal. Yeah,
and that's really, I think, what started me thinking towards this, like, wow, we really don't have that much time with our kids while they're with us in our house. And so it's really, it can be a really scary thought. It can be a thought that you don't like to think about that, but it can also be a really wonderful thing to think about what your relationship can be like with them when they're no longer with you. It will change, it will look different, it will be different, but it doesn't necessarily have to be a bad thing for them to move on and start their career, start their life on their own, and for you to be able to watch them grow into this person that is doing amazing things, that's following God's plan for their life, and we are Christian parents, and so a lot of the way that we handle things in our home and the things with our children are all kind of from that Christian perspective and Bible-based. And so when you think about our goals for our kids and what we want for them to become, we want them to become spiritually strong people. And so what are some things that we're going to do in our home or while they're here with us to allow them to grow into that? And it doesn't have to be this scary thing. It can be so wonderful. And we have 2 adult children now that are kind
adults.
of, technically they're adults.
Technical
They're
adults.
technically. But even that, just watching them make some of the decisions that they've made, just in their lives and with the things that they're starting to do with their lives and the relationships they're having with people, just to watch them start to kind of grow into that and apply some of those principles in their own lives because that's what they want for themselves. It can be a really exciting thing to watch. And so I'm just thinking towards that. And really the first thing, and it sounds really maybe kind of course, like it may totally make sense that you would do this, but caring for them in with kind of the basic things in their life. And I think caring about the things that you are providing for them, the type of home environment that you have for them. And I think a lot of maybe parents don't think about how just the small things impact kind of the day-to-day kind of things. When you're talking about a mom, I think of like doing the laundry, making sure they have the snacks that they like, making sure that we have, meals or food to eat, making sure they either know how to do their own laundry or that they're, they have clean clothes and sheets and all this stuff. And I think those things are so important, because that a child can have so much security and confidence in that, to know that there's someone in my life that's taking care of these very, very basic things for me. And then so just caring about the basic things in their life. And for me, I always think about caring for the basic things in their life, but then also caring for them with the time that you spend with them. Not just telling them that you love them, but just showing them with your actions and the way that you do those things for them, that you love them. And so when I think about some of these principles, that would be the first thing that I think about, is caring for them in those ways.
Meeting their needs and taking care of them. I think with all of these principles, and that one for sure, it's important to remember the goal, the end state, the end goal, because honestly, you may be taking care of your kids and meeting their needs. You said laundry, right? We're washing their clothes. We're trying to teach them how to take care of their own laundry. And one of the big fights we have in our house all the time is over the laundry.
Right.
It's something
Who's doing laundry right now?
we're constantly fighting over laundry. Seven people in our home, or 6 people in our home. And then we've got dogs. We've got to wash all their stuff, and we've got stuff going on all the time. So keeping in mind that what I'm doing is the right thing, because eventually it's going to get us to the right place, because kids are really terrible at showing appreciation. And sometimes even when you're doing the best to care for them, they don't understand what you're doing or the sacrifice you're making necessarily to care for them. And they're not saying thank you. So you're building in them something they may not even understand is being built, and expressing care and appreciation and concern for them. That's different though, right? And there's a question then. Maybe spoiling them or not making them to be accountable for the things that they do. Those are different things.
Yeah, but you're not doing the things for them because maybe they necessarily deserve it. And I feel like spoiling a lot of times is maybe you're trying to make up for something, like for yourself. You're trying to get them to like you. I think as parents, there's a really fine line, is like you want them to be your friend so bad and you want them to like you, but they're not always going to like you, and they're not always going to be happy with the things that you're doing. And even with these basic things, I mean, I think when you look at making a meal for them, they're not probably going to like everything you cook all of the time. The vegetables, I think every family probably on the planet struggles to get their kids to eat something that they're making that they don't like. And so really being okay with the idea that they're not always going to like you. And I think spoiling sometimes crosses that line where we want them to be our friends so bad that we're willing to do whatever they want, whatever will make them happy in the moment, not necessarily thinking about how this will impact them in the future.
And expressing genuine care for them by taking care of what they need.
And I think spoiling does not take into consideration the long-term relationship that you're going to have with your kids. So you want immediate, they like me right now, and they're happy with me right now. And so I'm going to say yes to this, I'm going to give this, I'm going to do this, because I'm not willing to consider how that's going to affect his future or her future, but then our future. And so I would say that's the difference between spoiling and genuinely caring for your kids, taking care of them, but also caring for them.
It's keeping the end in mind, knowing where you're going, and doing what's best for them, whether they like what's best for them or not. It's funny, parents will say, well, I don't want to do things that my kids don't like, or make them do things they don't like, but we make them take baths and brush their teeth and learn how to get dressed and go to school, and most kids don't like any of those things. But we do that because that's what's best for them. And that's how it is in these other areas as well.
And it's true, showing that you care about them, that you care about their future when you're taking the time to teach them, and that's expressing your love to them through that time to teach them. And I'm just using the laundry as an example because it's kind of a big deal in our house.
It's a big deal around here.
But teaching them how to do their own laundry, and teaching them how to clean their room and vacuum and do general taking care of the things that maybe that they have left, messes that they have left, or things that taking personal responsibility for them. I had a roommate in college that and I think this is kind of what I always think about when I think about my kids too. I had a roommate in college who did not know how to do anything. She did not know how to clean a bathroom, did not know how to iron her clothes, didn't know how to do her laundry. And so that semester, myself and the other girls in my room helped her really know how to do these things. And so you can express so much care really for your kids when you take the time, not just to spend with them, but also to teach them some of these basic things.
So taking care of their needs, meeting their needs, helping them to learn how to take care of their needs. What's the next thing to develop that relationship?
So I would say the next thing would be planning. Planning for kind of those progressing relationships that you're going to have with them, planning for time that you're going to spend with them, really just planning for those kinds of things. And so really planning for time that you're going to be spending with them. I think no matter what your situation looks like, whether you don't have kids in the home any longer and you're maybe a grandparent, or maybe you don't get to have your kids all the time. Maybe you share custody with someone else, but you know that you're going to have your kids during these certain times of the week or the month or whatever. And or if your kids are at school and you pick them up at the end of the day, there's always set times that you know that you're going to be spending with those children or those people in your life that would fall into that category, grandchildren. And so planning for those times that you're going to get to spend with them, and what is the conversation that you're going to have, and what are you going to do? What are you going to talk about? Maybe have a special snack for them or take them somewhere that they like, or even just planning for those conversations if you know that they're struggling with something, and kind of talking through those things with them and doing things that interest them, and maybe taking the time to learn a little bit about what they're interested in, whether that's sports or whatever activity. Maybe it's a creative thing that they like to do. Maybe taking the time to get to know them on that level, what they like, and then having conversations about that. Yep. So it's not about you, it's about them, and planning for those times that you're going to have with them. And so I would say within the planning, that would be one of the things.
Is planning the time that you have with them. Is planning the time.
Because if you go and make a habit of doing that, then you are really thinking about that lasting relationship with them.
There are a lot of people who have very busy jobs, and some travel, or maybe one parent is gone a lot and the other parent is trying to hold things together while they're the single parent at home. Mm-hmm. Maybe they're a single parent, and all these different situations. And I think it's easy sometimes to push back on that and say, well, that's easy for you to do. That's mm-hmm. easy for you to do, to plan, because your life is perfect or whatever. Mm-hmm. And it's very rigid and things are exactly the same. For us, this is one of the things we've really, I think we've struggled through this over the last few years. We were talking to the kids last night about something we've started to do as a family, and we're starting to do as a family. And in expressing that to them, I told them, we've tried to do this in the past. It hasn't worked. Part of the reason it's been a struggle for us is because we've got kids at different stages of life. So our older two are older, our younger two are younger, and they're clustered together. So it's like having two completely different groups of kids and completely different interests and maturity levels and those things. It can be that way with activities too. This is something, really probably for the last 9 or 10 years, I think we've really struggled with is what do we do as a family? Mm-hmm. Because our kids have completely different interests, in the places we go, the things that we watch on TV, the stuff that we do. So there are a lot of reasons to dismiss something like this. What would your answer be to someone who would say, well, that's just not going to work for me? I get that that's important or helpful to you, but that's just not going to work for me. Planning like that it's not going to happen here. What do you say to that?
I kind of feel like that no matter what your situation, that there's always something that you can do in this. Yeah. Even if it's not something that you do on a regular basis, even if it's like this is only going to happen once every 2 months, just planning ahead for that, because everyone has time. Yeah. And that's the reality of it. Time is a commodity that every person has, and we each have the same amount of time, and we get to choose what we do with that.
And it doesn't have to be an everyday thing or an every week thing or a really big thing every time. Mm-hmm. It can be just we're going to sit down for an hour and do a thing.
Yep. And children, I feel like, especially smaller kids, have the ability to see things something so small to us is such a big deal to them. And so even if it is like, I think one time I was home with Everett and I didn't even think this was that big of a deal, but he really likes s'mores. This is our youngest, Everett. So we made s'mores on the stove because I'm like, I'm not going to light a fire. I'm not going to whatever. So we roasted our s'mores on the gas stove. And he has talked about that like several times, since we've done that. That was months ago. And at the time I thought, I really want to do this with him because I know he likes them. How can we make this happen? And it was, to me, a very maybe silly thing because I thought, well, this is kind of lame. Like we got to make s'mores on the stove, but it was a really big deal to him. And so it can be just something really small and simple. And kids have the ability to kind of see those small things, and if it's something that they like and that they're interested in. So it can be something really small, but if you know it's going to happen and if you plan for it, then it can be really impactful.
So again, it comes back to priorities and understanding the end. What's the goal? Where am I trying to go? I'm not just trying to survive the day or survive the week or the month. There are days, there are weeks, probably months, that we all just try to survive, but you can't live that way. And if you're living that way, then you have to step back and say, something's got to change. I need to cut something out. Something's got to change. I need to figure that out and even get some help figuring that out. But if the goal is to build relationships, those relationships have to be built on something other than I'm your parent and you have to listen to me.
Yeah.
I remember hearing not too long ago, Tim Conway Jr., who's he's a son of Tim Conway, who made the films that we all loved. He was being interviewed. He's a broadcaster here in Southern California where we are. And he's talking about his dad, and someone asked him about this. Your dad was very busy, he traveled all the time, he recorded, he was making movies all the time, but you had a very close relationship with him. How did your dad find time to spend with you? And he was talking about that. He said, my dad would sometimes get home at 11, 12, 1 o'clock in the morning from work, from doing what he did, and I would have a sporting event that would start at 5 or 6 the next morning. He'd get a couple hours of sleep, he'd get up, and he'd take me to that event. And what he was expressing there was my dad was extremely busy, very popular, very well known. That was the prime of his life, but he made time to spend with the kids. And again, just a silly example, but I think one that we can all listen to.
That's a really good example, and that would really speak to the other part of planning for not just times, but planning for progressing relationships. So as your kids get older, and I feel like that's a really good example of how their relationship was able to evolve kind of over time. And that's something that has kind of hit home for us here recently, is as your kids kind of get older, your relationship changes. And so planning even for the kind of progressing relationships and as how the relationship changes and as they get older, it does take a little more planning because your kids are not with you all the time. And this is kind of what you were saying about us kind of having to come together as a family and decide, okay, like what works best for us now, where we are now. And I mean, we have the I guess it could be luxury of having our older kids in our house still with us. And so it does make it a little bit easier, even with our crazy schedules, to kind of plan for times with them, or as our relationships progress, taking time to help them with kind of what they're going through right now, or making ourselves available. And I kind of feel like that's a really huge thing with older kids too, or you could say adult children, is making yourself available to them. Just because maybe the world labels them as, okay, you're 18, you're an adult now, doesn't really mean that they have it all figured out. And really they still need parents or a parent to be available to them, to help them, to answer questions for them, to have conversations with them. They're making decisions about things that are really, really important in life. And so as a parent, to take that very seriously and know that just because maybe they're labeled as an adult by society doesn't necessarily mean that they don't need parents to speak into their lives or to help them or to guide them. And I think this is something that we've experienced, is just planning for those relationships. And that's really been something that we've been going through recently.
Yeah, and if you don't do the first part, if you're not investing in them and taking care of them and helping them to take care of themselves, teaching them the skills that they need, and then making time to just spend time with them and talking to them and wanting to interact with them, then as they get older, they will move away from you. Now, they're going to get advice from someone, they're going to get help from someone. That's how we are as humans. But they're not going to get it from you if they haven't already gotten in the habit of doing that. And parents of older kids, and again, we're at that stage of life, and so these are kind of the people that we know as well. Parents of older kids sometimes bemoan the fact that their kids won't talk to them, and yet for the years leading up to this period of time, they weren't super engaged in meaningful conversations. Again, spending time together, that's fun, or we're friends, we're buddies, that's good. But you need to be engaged in meaningful conversations when your kids are younger, and then a little bit older, and then as they go through those stages of life, so that when they're making the big life-changing decisions, they know that they can talk to you and that you care about listening to them.
Yeah. I was talking to our daughter Molly a while back, and she was just sharing some things with me that she's kind of going through, and she was like, it's kind of embarrassing for me to ask you these questions or talk to you about this kind of stuff. And I was like, oh my word, if you don't talk to me about that, like who are you going to talk to? I'm glad that you come to me with this, and I'm glad that you feel like you can talk to me about this, because who else do you have? Like, who else are you going to go to? And you should feel like that you can come to me. But I really feel like that is not that we do everything right or that we've done everything right. And I feel like we're just trying to figure it out all the time. But I've really...
We're just sharing what we're learning right now.
Right. Especially with Molly, I feel like I've really tried to make an effort in talking a lot, and because that's kind of one of the things she likes to talk about.
Sure.
So I know that she likes that, and that is very meaningful to her. And so just taking the time to talk to her when she wants to talk about the things she wants to talk about. And so I feel like that really opens the door then for her to feel like, okay, I can have these conversations and ask questions when I feel like I need to ask them. So yeah, that's really, really important.
Yeah. What else? What else do we need to be focused on?
I think no one can deny that parenting is really hard work.
Right.
And so I would say not like caring. We should be caring about the things that we talked about, planning for time and relationships as they progress, but also working. And then as we're working, I feel like it's working in the sense of, as we're doing the work of parenting, remember who we're doing that for. We're not necessarily doing it because our kids deserve it. You know, they can't audibly say, a lot of times, you know, when you change your baby's diaper, they're not going to tell you thank you.
Right.
They're not going to say, hey, thank you for making this amazing meal for me.
Right.
Or teaching me how to walk, or any of those kinds of things. But when we're working, and I would say as Christian parents, we remember that we're doing it to the Lord, and we're not doing it really for them. We're doing it because God has given these children to us, and it really doesn't matter how your children came to you. You know, if you've adopted children, if you are a foster parent, if you if they're not necessarily your children that you're parenting, if you have come into a marriage and this is the other person's children, it doesn't matter what those children are to you in your life. You're not necessarily doing it for them. You're doing it because God has given you to them, and they're in your home for a reason, and they've been given to you for a reason. No matter how they came into your life, they've been given to you for a reason. So what is that? What is the impact that you can make in your life as you're working, as to the Lord, and to be pleasing to Him as you're parenting or stewarding over the responsibility of taking care of the people that are in your home?
That's great.
Yeah.
I think one of the big things too, as we kind of come to a close, is don't parent with regret, and don't do things now because of mistakes that you made in the past. This is something I think a lot of parents struggle with. We struggle with it. You didn't do something right in the past, and so you're going to make up for that by doing something now. Typically what you end up doing is hanging on too tight. And then you say, well, I did this wrong back there, so I've got to hang on tight now. You need to parent with an open hand as much as you possibly can, and let your kids become who they are and who God created them to be, and make decisions and do your best to be there and guide them and help them. But if you've made a mistake in the past, you need to let them know that you made a mistake, and ask for forgiveness. Take the steps forward with them that need to be taken to reconcile whatever was damaged. And you'd be surprised how much your kids respect that. And they may be upset at first, but they'll learn to respect that. But don't parent from a place of regret or fear because of what I did back there. Something bad's going to happen in the future. Wherever you are, reconcile whatever needs to be reconciled. If forgiveness needs to be asked for or offered, do that. And then begin applying the principles, investing in your children, spending time with your kids, making time to spend with them, having meaningful conversations with them so you can continue to guide them as they get older, and really doing the work, just putting in the work day after day after day. There's a saying, I forget, you shared this with me at some point, but that they say in parenting, the days are long, but the years are short. And as long as those days can seem sometimes, the years really are short. So the work, it's a very limited time that we have to work, and so we need to put that work in, and just trust that it will be what it needs to be on the other side. Yeah,
and I've talked to a lot of people, mostly ladies, who, like you said, are discouraged, and when they hear something like this, or when they hear other people talking about, their kids or the amazing relationships that they have with their kids, it can be really discouraging. But to me, I always like to focus on moving forward.
Yeah.
I've had days where I come to the end of the day and I'm like, oh my word, I was such a horrible person today. And I yelled, or I, didn't have a good attitude about this.
Yeah,
or
I never do those things.
And then the need to go, the need to go and then apologize to them, I feel like can be so healing to the relationship, is when because they know that that it wasn't a good day, or that you did this thing that really hurt them. And for you to go to them and apologize, and even to them verbalize that, okay, it's about moving forward. Let's make here moving forward better. And even if you have older children that maybe you feel like the relationship is broken, going to them and trying to do what you can to make that relationship right and focus on moving forward and not being discouraged. There's nothing we can do about what happened in the past, but there's so much we can do about what the future looks like and about what moving forward looks like.
That's right.
So I always like to encourage people with that because it's been an encouraging thought to me.
Yeah, that's good.
So that's always encouraging, is to focus on the future and moving forward and what that can look like.
It's very good. I'm sure we'll spend more time talking about parenting. It's a big topic.
There's so much we could talk about.
If you have questions or comments or thoughts, go ahead and leave those in the comment section. I would love to get those from you. Even specific parenting questions, we certainly don't have it all figured out. We just happen to have been through a lot of the stages of parenting, and now we're getting to the place where our older kids are moving on. So we figured some things out and made a lot of mistakes along the way, and we'd be happy to talk about some of those. We're anything but perfect, so we're happy to share that too. Susanna's a lot more perfect than I am, but we have our struggles. We do our best. But if you have questions or comments, we'd love to hear those from you. But I'm sure we'll talk about this some more. So thank you for watching. Really appreciate it. And if, again, this is helpful to you, subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet. I hope that you have. Like this video, share this video with someone else, hit the notification bell. That lets you know when other content comes online. And we would love to share that with you. And we look forward to talking to you next time. Thank you.